The rain taps steadily against the windshield, each drop sounding louder in the silence Ethan has built around himself. When his phone lights up, the glow feels invasive, almost accusatory. One message. One sentence. Lena Parker's words don't explode into his chest, they seep in slowly, like cold water through a crack he pretended wasn't there. I think your wife has a lover. Ethan doesn't shout. He doesn't swear. What tightens his throat isn't rage but the sudden, sick clarity that the thought has lived inside him for months. He looks at the house, the porch light warm, the windows dark, and realizes how small he feels sitting outside something he once believed was unbreakable. The humiliation comes quietly, the awareness that others may have noticed before he did. Love didn't blind him, hope did. And now, hope flickers like a dying bulb, buzzing painfully before it goes out. Ethan's thumbs hover over the screen longer than necessary, not because he doesn't know what to say, but because he knows exactly what the words will do. You'd better sit down. He sends it without explanation, a calculated restraint that surprises even him. In that moment, something shifts. He's no longer the passive recipient of bad news, he's part of the storm now. Memories begin to intercut against the present like shards of broken glass. Maya laughing softly at her phone that morning, turning the screen away too quickly. A late-night shower that ran too long. Lena's distant stare from across a cafe weeks ago, eyes tracking Maya with concern rather than envy. Ethan realizes the truth didn't arrive suddenly. It assembled itself piece by piece, waiting for permission to be seen. His calm isn't strength, it's shock wearing a convincing disguise. The engine goes quiet when Ethan turns the key, and the silence feels ceremonial, like the pause before a verdict is read. He doesn't step out of the car. Not yet. The house looms ahead, familiar, ordinary, devastating. Inside, Maya exists in a version of reality that may already be collapsing, whether she knows it or not. Ethan rests his forehead briefly against the steering wheel, breathing in the faint scent of old leather and rain-soaked air. What shocks him most isn't fear, it's relief. Someone finally confirmed the truth he'd been gaslighting himself out of believing. This moment, suspended in rain and darkness, becomes a threshold. He understands that walking through that front door means choosing a new life, even if he doesn't know what it looks like yet. His whisper is barely audible, but it seals the moment. If I open that door, nothing will ever be the same. Ethan Cole wasn't always tired in the way that seeps into bone. Once, he had been sharp-eyed and ambitious, an architect who believed buildings could correct what life damaged, order replacing chaos, intention overpowering neglect. But endurance was his first education. As a boy, he watched his father sit through dinners where his mother's mind was always elsewhere, her silence heavier than anger. Love, Ethan learned, wasn't about being chosen daily. It was about staying quiet long enough to avoid being abandoned. That lesson followed him into adulthood and into his marriage. Little by little, he learned to shrink, lowering expectations, swallowing needs, smoothing every edge that might cause friction. He cooks because it's easier than asking. He compromises because peace feels like proof of love. Now, sitting inside a life he carefully constructed, Ethan feels emotionally overdrawn, a man who gave so much of himself that is no longer sure what remains. Maya Cole moves through the world with ease, polished, articulate, admired in rooms where attention feels like currency. As a marketing executive, she sells narratives for a living, and the most convincing one she tells is about herself, that she chose stability over passion and paid for it with invisibility. She tells herself she sacrificed too much marrying Ethan, the safe man, the predictable man, until resentment becomes justification. Emotional distance becomes self-care. Lena Parker, on the other hand, sees without needing to sell anything. Beautiful in a way that invites assumptions, Lena has learned to let people underestimate her depth. Single by choice, observant by nature, she has watched Maya slowly detach since college, mistaking restlessness for growth. And she has always noticed Ethan's decency, the kind that bends instead of breaks, the kind she quietly fears won't survive a marriage built on imbalance. There are no screaming matches in the Cole household, only an eerie, practiced calm. Silence fills the space where intimacy once lived, replaced by schedules, shared calendars, and logistical conversations that never risk honesty. Ethan does more because it's easier than explaining why he feels invisible. Maya dismisses his instincts with gentle gaslighting. You're imagining things. She controls the narrative so thoroughly that doubt begins to feel like a flaw in his character. But the stakes run deeper than heartbreak. Their finances are intertwined, shared assets, a joint business loan that binds him to her decisions. More terrifying is the mirror Ethan sees forming. his father's quiet resignation replaying itself, generation after generation. This isn't just about betrayal, it's about identity, dignity, and the terror of realizing that endurance, once mistaken for love, might actually be self-erasure. And Ethan is running out of himself to give. The proof doesn't arrive as a confession or a scandal, it arrives quietly, like a secret slipping through a crack. Lena sends a blurred photo taken through a restaurant's reflective glass. Maya's silhouette caught mid-laughter, leaning slightly too close to someone whose face is obscured by motion. It could be nothing. That's what makes it everything. Then comes the voice note, short, time-stamped, accidentally recorded. 2 voices. One male, low and familiar in its confidence. Maya's voice softened in a way Ethan hasn't heard in years. No names. No declarations. Just tone, intimacy implied between breaths. Ethan listens twice, then a third time, heart slowing instead of racing. This isn't shock, it's confirmation. The absence of explicit proof hurts more because it leaves no room for denial. His mind fills the gaps with a precision born of love and long neglect. Doubt finally collapses under its own weight. That evening, Ethan asks the question casually, as if nothing inside him has shifted. How was your night? His tone is practiced neutrality, the same voice he uses when discussing bills or grocery lists. Maya doesn't hesitate. She answers smoothly, too smoothly, offering details that feel rehearsed rather than remembered. A late meeting. A client dinner. Exhaustion. She meets his eyes without flinching, smiles at the right moment, and continues scrolling through her phone. The ease of the lie cuts deeper than the lie itself. Ethan realizes this isn't panic speaking, it's habit. She has told this story before, maybe many times. As she moves through the kitchen, comfortable in deception, Ethan feels something inside him detach. Not anger, but a quiet recalibration. This is what mastery looks like. Not carelessness. Not guilt. But confidence born from repetition. Ethan doesn't confront her. He doesn't install apps or hire strangers to follow his wife. Instead, he does something far more dangerous. He starts paying attention. He watches patterns, not devices. Notes how Maya's posture changes when certain names appear in conversation. How her voice lowers when she steps outside to take calls. How late nights follow a rhythm, never random. He notices the precision in her timing, the way excuses align too neatly with opportunity. And then the realization settles in, heavy and irreversible. She isn't new at this. She's careful because she's experienced. This didn't begin weeks ago. It began long enough ago for guilt to fade and technique to develop. The truth lands just as Lena's next message arrives, lighting his phone in the dark. I know who he is. And suddenly, Ethan understands. This story is bigger than betrayal. It's a hidden history. The truth doesn't arrive with drama. It arrives with recognition. Lena never says the lover's name outright. She doesn't have to. Ethan pieces it together from fragments. A client dinner here, a familiar company name there, a memory he wishes he could forget. Julian Reeves. 38. Polished. A man Ethan once vouched for, recommending Maya for a high-visibility project that changed her career trajectory. The betrayal sharpens when it becomes professional as well as personal, his integrity weaponized against him. Every handshake, every reference email now feels retroactively poisoned. Maya never admits it, but the confidence with which she moves through conversations tells Ethan enough. This isn't a reckless affair, it's a carefully maintained second life. And the cruel irony settles in. Ethan didn't just open the door to their connection, he built the hallway that led them together, trusting both of them to walk it honestly. Maya doesn't deny, she reframes. When Ethan asks questions, she tilts her head slightly, concerned rather than defensive. You're remembering it wrong. You've been stressed lately. The word paranoid slips in softly, disguised as worry. Over time, Ethan begins doubting the reliability of his own thoughts, so he starts writing them down. Small notes in his phone, timestamps beside observations, not as evidence for confrontation but as anchors to reality. Lena becomes essential in her restraint. She never touches him, never crosses emotional lines. She only confirms what he already sees, calmly and without agenda. That's consistent. You're not imagining it. In her steadiness, Ethan feels his perception stabilize. The fog lifts inch by inch. Trust in others may be broken, but trust in himself, long neglected, begins to return. Ethan tells no one. Not his friends, who would rush toward anger before understanding. Not his family, whose sympathy would feel like judgment. The truth becomes something he carries like a second spine, rigid, heavy, shaping how he moves through every day. The isolation deepens until even his own house feels unfamiliar. One night, long past midnight, he wakes to the sound of Maya laughing softly in the next room, phone pressed close to her ear. It isn't casual laughter. It's intimate, unrestrained, the kind that used to belong to him. Ethan lies still, staring at the ceiling, recognizing the sound with devastating clarity. She hasn't laughed like that with him in years, not since before silence replaced closeness. In that moment, grief finally overtakes suspicion. This isn't about losing a wife. It's about realizing he has already been replaced, emotionally. Long ago, Ethan chooses the restaurant deliberately, quiet, neutral, impossible to weaponize with emotion. Candlelight flickers across the table as Maya arrives, pleasantly surprised by the invitation, mistaking calm for reconciliation. Ethan is precise in every movement, his voice steady, his posture relaxed in a way she hasn't seen in years. He doesn't raise his phone or slide evidence across the table. He doesn't need to. The preparation lives in his mind, timelines aligned, inconsistencies mapped, contradictions recorded not to expose her, but to steady himself. This dinner isn't about catching Maya. It's about witnessing the truth without being destabilized by it. When he speaks, his words are measured, surgical. No accusations. No emotional spikes. Just one final question framed so carefully that evasion becomes impossible. For the first time, Maya senses something unfamiliar across the table. Not fear, not pleading, but resolve. Maya's composure fractures in stages. First confusion, then irritation, and finally release. She exhales and admits it, not dramatically, but with a weary honesty that feels rehearsed. Yes, there was someone else. But even in confession, she reshapes the story to protect herself. You stopped being enough, she says, voice steady but edged with resentment. She speaks of suffocation, of emotional stability mistaken for stagnation, of needing to feel alive again. Ethan listens without interruption, noticing how easily she repurposes his reliability into a flaw. She doesn't apologize, she rationalizes. The affair becomes a symptom, not a choice. In her version, he didn't lose her, he failed to keep up. And for a brief moment, she expects him to absorb the blame as he always has. She expects endurance. What she doesn't expect is silence that doesn't bend. Ethan waits until the silence settles before he speaks again. When he does, his words land with controlled finality. He tells her about the legal separation, already filed. The joint accounts, frozen within the bounds of the law. The protections put in place weeks ago, while she was busy rewriting reality. Maya's confidence collapses as understanding floods her expression. This wasn't passivity. It was preparation. For the first time, the power dynamic shifts entirely. Ethan isn't reacting, he's concluding. He doesn't raise his voice or demand remorse. He simply states facts, each one dismantling the version of him she relied on. Maya realizes too late that the man across from her is no longer enduring. His choosing. Planning didn't make Ethan cruel, it made him free. And as the check arrives, she understands the truth that will haunt her. She didn't outgrow him. She underestimated him. The aftermath unfolds without drama, exactly the way real consequences do. Lawyers replace late-night arguments. Paperwork replaces promises. The divorce moves forward methodically, stripping the marriage down to facts and signatures. Friends take sides quietly, some disappearing altogether, unsure how to reconcile the story they were told with the one now emerging. At work, Maya's narrative finally cracks. The ethical breach, mixing a client relationship with a personal affair, doesn't explode into scandal, but it erodes trust. Meetings become colder. Opportunities quietly rerouted. Credibility, once questioned, doesn't return easily. Ethan watches all of this from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. This isn't revenge, it's consequence. For the first time, he understands that justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it simply restores balance, letting actions finish the sentences people tried to interrupt with excuses. Therapy isn't cinematic for Ethan, it's uncomfortable, slow, and necessary. Sitting across from a stranger, he begins dismantling the belief that endurance equals love. He speaks about his father, about silence mistaken for nobility, about how shrinking himself once felt like loyalty. Session by session, he learns that masculinity isn't measured by how much pain a man can absorb without complaint. Silence, he realizes, was never strength. It was avoidance dressed as virtue. He practices speaking plainly, setting boundaries without apology, choosing himself without guilt. Outside the office, life grows quieter but fuller. He cooks because he enjoys it now, not because it prevents conflict. He designs again, not for approval but for purpose. The growth isn't dramatic, it's foundational. Ethan isn't becoming harder. He's becoming clearer. And clarity, he learns, is a form of courage. Lena remains exactly what she has always been, present, honest, and unentangled. She doesn't step into the space Maya left, and she never offers herself as a reward for survival. Instead, she listens when Ethan speaks, and tells the truth when he wavers. Her role is not rescue, it's reflection. Through her, Ethan learns the difference between being seen and being needed. As the dust settles, there's no triumphant final scene, no raised voices, no public vindication. Just equilibrium. The house feels neutral again. His thoughts feel reliable. The past no longer presses forward demanding repetition. Justice arrives not as punishment, but as alignment, life matching truth. Ethan stands alone one evening, balanced rather than broken, understanding something essential at last. Empowerment isn't winning the story. It's no longer being trapped inside someone else's version of it. Months later, Ethan's world has been distilled down to essentials. The new apartment is minimalist not by trend, but by intention. Clean lines, open space, nothing demanding emotional labor. Morning light enters without resistance, and for the first time in years, his body doesn't brace itself when he wakes. Peace isn't loud, it's the absence of dread. He moves through the space slowly, aware of how quiet no longer feels empty. Every object has been chosen, not inherited from compromise. There are no photos that require explanation, no corners haunted by unfinished arguments. The life he built after leaving isn't impressive, but it's honest. Ethan understands now that healing didn't arrive as joy, it arrived as neutrality, as the ability to breathe without justification. This apartment isn't a refuge from pain, it's proof that survival can become stability, and stability can finally feel like home. The phone vibrates once on the counter, subtle enough that Ethan almost ignores it. When he sees Maya's name, there's no spike of adrenaline, only recognition without attachment. The message is short, familiar in tone. I never meant to hurt you. A sentence shaped to ease guilt more than offer accountability. Ethan doesn't open it. He doesn't reread old threads or imagine responses. He deletes it unopened, the gesture quiet but definitive. This isn't cruelty, it's boundary. He understands now that closure doesn't come from being understood by the person who caused the wound. It comes from choosing not to reopen it. The past doesn't demand an audience anymore. In that moment, Ethan feels the weight of an old habit lift, the reflex to explain, to soften, to absorb discomfort for others. Silence returns, but this time, it belongs to him. That evening, Ethan opens his laptop at a small desk by the window. The screen glows against the quiet room, inviting rather than demanding. He doesn't write about betrayal or loss. He writes about endurance and what it cost him. About mistaking silence for strength. About learning that survival isn't something to apologize for. The words come steadily, not polished, not performative, but true. His final thought settles fully in his chest. My body didn't fail me. My silence did. And I finally stopped apologizing for surviving. He pauses, hands resting on the keyboard, feeling the rare satisfaction of alignment, thought matching action, voice matching self. Outside, the city hums softly, indifferent and alive. Ethan closes his eyes briefly, then continues writing, not as a man reclaiming the past, but as one finally authoring himself. Fade out.